If you or someone you know has diabetes, you may have built up an extra supply of test strips and lancets. That's where we come in. We'll buy the supplies that you don't need and resell them to those in need to prevent waste. Help us make diabetes management more affordable. Visit us at teststripswithaz.com.
All right, joining me right now has just been crushing it on the microphone, doing the play-by-play for UFC events, and on the Contender Series. He's going to be heading to Uruguay to handle the play-by-play duties this weekend, which will be headlined by Valentina Shevchenko and Liz Carmouche. Happy to be joined by Brendan Fitzgerald. Thank you for doing this, Brendan. I'm a big fan of your work. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. Happy to be with you, man.
And it's awesome to have you here. First of all, you had a pretty cool moment in Sacramento watching Uriah Faber's return and making that call. Faber gets stunned early, but then he finishes Ricky Simon, who I think has a very bright future in the UFC. What an incredible moment to take in. Walk us through what was going on in your mind as such a cool moment was happening right in front of you.
Well, everything was going on in my hands, as everyone saw. But what's crazy is when I was getting ready for that fight, and I obviously haven't been with the UFC long enough to have called a Faber fight in the past. He retired before I kind of started, or so we thought. But I knew him a little bit from when he did the Snootcast that first season of the Contender Series. I met him, and when you're kind of, just still wrapping your head around how he's going to do, how he's going to look. Putting together exactly what he kind of meant to the UFC on his way up and the WEC from years and years ago. And I was researching for that fight, and obviously it's just, and I think Ricky Simon's great, and I really like him too. But the script was Uriah Faber returns in Sacramento, and man, what would it be like if he gets a big win? And then I started looking down the stats of when's his last knockout? I knew he had a lot of decisions in a row, and then submission guy, okay. And I just kept looking down the list, and I'm like, wow, he hasn't had a knockout or a TKO since 2007. So I made sure to write that in my notes, because those are the types of stats that you want to have if you need them. I didn't expect to need it, because the idea of him getting a knockout win is crazy, and so that was part of my freak out. When I stood up and freaked out, obviously it was a big moment of surprise. Bisping did the same thing. Jimmy, who's getting some notoriety as our stage manager, kind of popped out of his chair too. But part of my excitement was wow, he hasn't done this since 2007, and I knew it, and I knew I would use it and say it, whatever. But that was part of my excitement. It was I knew how rare it was in the moment, because I had just kind of looked that up a few days before, and I'm like, wow, unbelievable that I kind of noticed it the other day, and here I am needing it. And then the first round, and then the producer tells me in my ear his fastest finish in his career, which is also crazy. So there was just all sorts. I knew it was a big moment, just him getting the win, but then to get it done like that, I kind of knew how crazy it was. So it kind of brought out the crazy in all of us.
You've been covering sports for a while now. Where does that moment rank for you in terms of things that you've seen, things that you've called over the years?
Yeah, I was talking to my boss a couple of days later, and he kind of making fun of me. He stood up and he started doing this, and we were talking more about it, and I was just might have been the biggest moment in my career in terms of the profile of what was happening, and that I was on the call, and then we don't want to just have our reactions to every fight in there, but obviously with John and Joe, when they're calling big events, if there's a big moment in a big important fight, then they'll show our reactions, because they're usually pretty interesting to watch. So Uriah Faber coming back in his hometown, coupled with the first round knockout, so rare, coupled with our reaction, which was kind of nuts, certainly put shine on my career like no other. I mean, I've covered big events. I've been to a Super Bowl. I've been to the Stanley Cup Finals. I watched the Red Sox win the World Series in 2013. So I've been at big events, but I haven't been as much a part of it as I was for that one. So in that regard, for my career and me personally, then that probably was the biggest.
Yeah, that was such a cool moment for the sport. But, maybe we'll create some more moments as you get ready to head to Uruguay.
Let's
Valentina Shevchenko is going to defend her title against Liz Carmouche. And, a lot of people in Twitter land are poo-pooing this card as a whole. And, the hardcore fan and myself, like, I'm looking up and down. There's definitely some fun fights. It is a pretty thin card on paper, but, as you're doing your research and looking into a lot of these fighters and the matchups, do you believe a lot of fans are going to be pleasantly surprised with this one?
So, I generally call these types of events, right? The UFC fight. Like, I'm not the pay-per-view guy. John Anik calls the pay-per-views and the big ESPN shows for the most part, and I call the UFC fight nights. I did it on FS1 now on ESPN Plus, and then we're sprinkled in with ESPN2 and whatever network they happen to be on. So I've experienced kind of the fight cards where a lot of people are like, not a big fight card. And I've also experienced like people saying that about some of the most fun fight cards that I've ever called. So like Greenville, if you look back at that, like on paper, not a lot of huge name value. And it's just like, if you're a casual fan of the sport or whatever, it's like, this isn't the star power card in Greenville, except those fights were like nuts the whole night. Like Eric Spicely and Deron Winn, people, unless you really, really know the sport, might not have ever heard of those guys, but they come out and they throw on a slugfest. And I'd never seen Dana get on his phone after a fight and put out a Twitter video like, hey, awesome fight, guys, way to get the night started. And the fights kind of followed suit. Like, so we had, and in Rochester, we had 9 finishes in Rochester. And then last year in Nebraska, in Lincoln, Nebraska, we had 9 finishes in Lincoln, Nebraska. So it's like, of course, Gaethje and Vic in the main event there, Gaethje was big name, and we had the Korean Zombie big name. But, by and large, they were still great events all the way through, even though they didn't have the biggest star power. So whenever I hear that, I pay it no mind. I have to do the same amount of preparation, and I have to be ready to have a great night because the fights are oftentimes really good because the fighters that maybe you haven't heard of or don't have a big name value, they want the name value. So how do you get that? You get it by being exciting, kind of maybe taking some chances, and so that could be what we're in for in Uruguay.
When you talk to these fighters getting ready and trying to learn a little bit more about them, do you think they carry a little bit of an extra chip on their shoulder, knowing that fans may not, see this card as a big over-the-radar type of card? Do you think that they kind of have to prove a little bit more? They have a little extra sense of hunger, so to speak?
There's some that do. It just depends on the fighter. Like you talk to a lot of different fighters, and it's like, they are as different as people can be, And so when they're getting ready, I mean, some people approach it differently. Some people are like, I just want to win at all costs. And other people are like, it might be better for my career. Like Justin Gaethje, to me, has like a healthy perspective on like what he is. And now he's obviously very good and as good as anybody else and a chance to compete for a title. But sometimes it's just like, you know what? Like, I don't know. I'm not going to win every fight the way I'm in, but people are going to want to watch me fight. So there's people like that too. I don't think it's a conscious choice like collectively, but the opportunity is there no matter what event you're on to stand out and put on a show. And maybe in an event like this where at the top of the card isn't for a belt, like in Edmonton or something, it's like you have more of a chance to be what everyone's talking about on Monday because, but there is a title. So in Uruguay. So, I just think it's like it's in a fighter's best interest to, put on a show the best they can, and obviously a win's really good too. But if you win and put on a show, or even if you lose and put on a show, it could be better for your career in the long run. So it just depends.
And if you really look at this card, there's some names on there. I mean, you got Gilbert Burns fighting on short notice against a 20-0 guy in Alexei Konchenko. I like the Gutierrez de Freitas fight a lot. Tisha Torres is fighting Marina Rodriguez. That's a ton of fun in my opinion. So there's some really good matchups here if you really look deep at it. What fight, in your opinion, is really flying under the radar for this card?
Oh, I got to pull out the card. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Keep naming fights from that card if they're right in front of you.
We're going to get into some of the major ones, but in terms of name value, I mean, there's some fun ones there. I love the Tisha Torres Marina Rodriguez fight. I think I like that one.
And Tisha's a big name, or relatively big name, certainly in that strawweight division. Marina Rodriguez is like, she's really, really good. She's good. She's not afraid to throw down. Man, all of them are melding together in terms of cards because I got to get ready for China and Vancouver and Mexico City. I can't give you a name and I don't have my card right in front of me.
I put you on the spot. Unreal.
Gutierrez is good. Oh, Rogerio Bontorin, Julian Paiva. That's a interesting flyweight matchup. Like those guys were fun on both those guys had amazing fight on Brazil Contender Series. I think Bontorin was the one who got like rocked, like he was almost out on his feet completely. He came back and submitted the guy, and then Paiva fought Alan Nascimento, and like to the point where I was like, give them both a contract, and Paiva won by split decision, so he gets the contract. So I like that fight, and like flyweights can be good, man. Figueiredo and Pantoja get fight of the night the other night. So like those two Brazilians, I think they'll shine, and like the crowd gets behind them, and then Bobby Moffett too will look to bounce back. I forgot Moffett was on the card. Moffett and Enrique Barzola. That's a good fight too. I like that one.
This is a good reminder, everybody, to just go and look at the card. Don't just look at the main card. Go in there, go on Tapology or wherever, and go down and look at the card. There's some fun fights there. I want to run through some of these fights that people are definitely talking about. Obviously, we got the light heavyweight divisional fight between Volkan Ozdemir and Ilir Latifi. This fight was supposed to take place in Newark, and now it's on this card. So the light heavyweight division is as interesting as it has been in years, and with a lot of these, young up-and-coming guys really making their mark right now, it changes the conversation that we've been having over the last couple of years. So I guess my question is, with the way it looks right now at 205, what is at stake in this fight between the former title challenger, Volkan Ozdemir, and Ilir Latifi?
Well, so Volkan, needs to win, right? Like, I don't like to say needs to win or is going to be looking for a job. I'll never say that because I don't think that that's true at all. But comes out guns blazing, 3 wins, gets himself to a title shot, and then it's like, what can you do when you're fighting the top level competition? You know what I mean? And so obviously it didn't go well against DC. Anthony Smith came up as on the rise, and then. I think a lot of people thought that he did enough to beat Dom Reyes and obviously didn't get his hand raised that night. So for him, it's like, even though he could be satisfied with his performance against Reyes and feel like he got robbed, he obviously still has plenty to prove that he does belong inside the top 10. I think a guy like Latifi is a good guy to go against to kind of like reiterate that. Latifi's never lost back-to-back fights, but he's coming off a loss as well. So I'll be interested to see like what the game plan is from each of these guys. If they're like throwing caution to the wind, like I got to get out there and emphatically win to kind of resume and turn in the other direction, or if it's like sometimes when the pressure to win is so heavy, then you kind of see how they react. But that was a fight that was supposed to happen in June, then it was supposed to happen in Newark, and now it's going to happen in Uruguay. So. At long last, I think it's a fight that people want to see.
Yeah, I wonder if that kind of changes their mental and physical approach to it because, you're preparing for June. Okay, now we're moving it to August 3rd. I mean, it's only a week for the second move, but still,
right.
You're planning on flying to Newark, New Jersey, and the rolling hills and sprawling landscapes in Newark, and now, you're heading to Uruguay on top of that. So I think you're going to see a lot more caution to the wind in this fight, all things considered. But in a fight we're definitely going to see no caution thrown to the wind is Platinum Mike Perry taking on Vicente Luque in a welterweight scrap. And much like what we saw with Nico Price and Jeff Neal at UFC 240, I have a hard time believing that this one is not going to live up to the hype. I mean, Luque is coming off that really fun fight with Brian Barberena. He had a quick finish of Derek Krantz. He's won 5 fights in a row, which a lot of people don't even realize. And he's taken on an always game Platinum Mike Perry, who's looked really good as of late, although he had the setback with Donald Cerrone. As a fan and as a commentator, you got to be pretty excited to call this one.
Yeah, like this is the fight when they announce it. It's like, nice. Because we know we're going to have a moment that night, right? No matter what else happens on the rest of the 11 fight or 12 fights, we're going to have a moment in that fight. And like Mike Perry, so I called this fight against Cerrone, and it's just like the guy's kind of mojo just emanates in the arena. You know what I mean? Like people love to watch him, whether they love to hate him, whether they want him to win. Like he's just can't deny kind of personality. And people just like his walkout's exciting. He's exciting when he's in the cage staring the guy down, like during introductions. He's exciting when he's getting introduced. Like he's just going to be so energetic, and then he brings it out of his opponent, which in this case doesn't really need it, because Luque he's like such a killer. So, they love him in South America because he's like got family in Chile. He's from Brazil. He's born in New Jersey. Like he's a citizen of the world, speaks 3 languages. So like internationally, Luque is very, very popular and with good reason. And then he's also a very good fighter. And then like the welterweight division is on fire more so than any other division right now. So, the term people's main event, it's like that certainly applies to this one. Oddly enough, again, featuring Mike Perry. He's been in a few of these.
Yeah, he's a fan favorite, like you said. He's sort of that I'll fight anyone at any time kind of a guy. And, Luque has been overlooked a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I think he's right there in the conversation, or at least he should be. He's picked up wins and finishes over some really tough guys in this division. So if he goes out and finishes Mike Perry in the co-main event of this card in Uruguay, is it time to really start talking about Vicente Luque as a title contender? I mean, a lot of guys ranked above him are coming off of losses. He'll have a 6-fight winning streak in one of the deepest divisions in the sport right now.
I think as long as he gets this win and the welterweight division kind of shakes out a little bit more, you're going to see him get, ranked opponents, top 10 guys. If you remember in Rochester, he was supposed to fight Neil Magny, and then Magny has to fall out of that one. So he was going to start getting in that, but then, of course, it's like, I'll take the fight against Derek Krantz. The thing that I like about Luque is like, the division's kind of stacked. Like, welterweight's tough right now. It's tough to get a fight. It's tough to kind of climb into those rankings because it's just who do you move out? Like, it's just totally stacked with, like, big names. So what I like about Luque is he's not like, I'm going to sit out and wait patiently until you give me a guy who's 11 or 9 or whatever. He's like, I want to stay active. Sure, give me Mike Perry. I'll put my winning streak on the line against a dangerous guy. He was going to do it against Magny, but then, too, everything to lose against Derek Krantz, almost nothing to gain against a guy like that. He's like, no, I still want to stay active. Like, I want to keep fighting. And that's another way that you gain respect from fans and the UFC and continue to build your name. So that's what I like about Luque, too, is like, and so it's all there. People know that Luque can fight. They know. It's just a matter of, like, sometimes the timing doesn't work out. This year it hasn't for him in terms of fighting guys in the top 10, but it's coming. It's coming, certainly. And obviously he's got to beat Mike Perry first, but it's one of those fights where it's like very little to lose on each side of each of these guys. I think everything to gain for both of these guys in a win or a loss, too, depending on how the fight plays out.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Let's talk about the main event. We got Valentina Shevchenko defending the women's flyweight title against Liz Carmouche. And these two have a little bit of a history with Carmouche getting a win over the champion. But that fight happened in 2010, and Shevchenko's just look unbeatable as of late. I mean, one of the best fighters on the planet right now. Is history enough here for Liz Carmouche? Like, do you think that plays a factor in this fight at all on either side?
No. Both of them, with what they say and, like, who they are. I mean, we're 9 years removed. You know what I mean? I hate to think of 2010 as almost 10 years ago because it makes us all that much older. But, like, it's crazy. It's 9 years ago. So not only do you have 9 years of growth and training, and neither of them were in the UFC. Life has changed so much in terms of like where they've lived, where they train. I mean, think like, how old are you, Mike?
I'm 36.
Okay, so when you were 27, like life was a little different. You know what I mean? Like I'm 36 too. Life was a little different at 27. Like, here I am in Las Vegas. Like, I've lived in like 5 different places since then. So I can't, really compare anything in my life that's happened with them. So I think that, that doesn't really matter. And also it was a doctor's stoppage win. Like Valentina tells the story. She's just like, I thought she was bleeding, but I guess I was bleeding. And then the doctor said, no, stop. And the fight was over. So that's her loss to Liz Carmouche. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I just think we'll see a big favorite in Shevchenko, but like Carmouche is a tough person to finish, tough person to beat. She almost beat Ronda Rousey in that first one too. Like she has the game plan and the ability to be a tough fighter to go against. So I think it's going to be, Shevchenko's not as big of a favorite as she was against Jessica Ai. So, who knows?
I mean, betting odds aside, I look at things outside of the betting odds. I look at things on paper, what you've done lately. I mean, this is a recency bias kind of a sport. But in terms of, and this is no disrespect to Liz Carmouche at all, in terms of biggest upsets in UFC history, if Liz Carmouche goes out there and shocks the world in Uruguay, where does that rank?
Yeah, I don't know where it ranks, like, because there's been a lot of big upsets. But, like, in a title fight, yes, certainly. It would be one of the bigger ones. without question, because Shevchenko just looks so unbeatable with like her skills, like her ability and her power. Her athleticism is like on a different level. She has a size advantage on Carmouche as well. I think. I mean, she seems like she'd be like longer, like a longer fighter. Carmouche is like more that stockier kind of like grappling body. I'm not going to be like this would be the biggest of all time, but it would be up there. Like it would be like wow, and they'd probably have to run it back, right? Just thinking with what Shevchenko has shown to be able to do,
especially in that division right now. And there's a lot of people saying, if Shevchenko goes out there and wins, like, let's get her up there and fight Amanda Nunes again. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, look at all of these contenders that are coming up. You got the Chikagians of the world. You got the Andrea Lees of the world. Jennifer Maia just had a big win over Roxy not too long ago. Joanne Calderwood's right there too. So, I mean, do you agree with that? Do you agree with me on that one? Like, let's just let these contenders emerge. Let them keep coming and coming. And then, if Amanda is still there a little while down the road and you keep running off wins, then we can do that fight. We've already seen it twice.
Yeah, I don't think they need to rush back into it now. Obviously, the talk is like Nunes and Cyborg too. So I think if they were looking for an opponent for Nunes that's gonna feature, kind of two champions, or Cyborg's not a champion in this regard, but like a mega fight in the women's side of things, I think they're looking at Nunes Cyborg too. I think that obviously Shevchenko, if she keeps winning, is going to find her way into another fight with Nunes. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't like to rush it. I don't see it as like her next opponent. I don't think they need to rush into that like that.
Before we wrap up, a couple more things. I want to talk Contender Series with you because I love it so much. It's one of my favorite things in the sport right now. We have seen, especially this season, we've seen some really great performances on the Contender Series this season. You've been part of some really good ones. 5 fighters getting contracts, a bunch with 4 fighters getting contracts. Based on what you've seen, who are some of the guys and gals that have competed this season who just have crazy upsides that you can see right now? You're just like, oh, this guy has it, this girl has it.
Yeah, Miles Johns. For sure. Miles Johns just sticks out to me as a guy who's built to contend in the UFC. And he didn't get the finish in his Contender Series fight, but to me, it's like, I don't know. His style, his attitude, Fortis MMA is on fire. He's got the coach. He's got the camp. He certainly has the ability. Like, he looked good on the feet. I feel like he could have ended that fight on the feet, and he kept relying on his wrestling because that's his background and stuff. But interested to see what he does in Vancouver because, it looks like he'll be in action right away. So, like, that's the name that sticks out to me where it's like, this guy's ready. Like, he's ready. And I think it says a lot that Dana thought he was ready even though he didn't get a finish, which usually is like you need to get a finish to kind of get into the UFC on the Contender Series. But we've seen a little bit different than that. Hunter Azure, I think, is really good too. Another bantamweight who didn't get the finish that night. That night with the 5 contracts, it's like there's a few names there, like Joe Selecki, I think, like those guys that are just like lifers in jiu-jitsu that have the ability to kind of mix things together. I'm interested to see what they're like at the top level. You know what I mean? Like, certainly he earned himself a contract and was like, I'm going to take this guy down and I can, put my jiu-jitsu to work, and he did. He choked him unconscious in the first round. So then, like, when you get up to the top, it's always interesting to see, like, what they transition to, in terms of how they can compete on the highest stage. But I would say Miles Johns, for me, is to me, was like the most UFC-ready guy coming in that proved it, that quick turnaround. Okay, now let's see what he does.
Yeah, what's interesting about that fight is he basically fought that fight on one leg. He was hurt going into that fight. He hurt himself a few weeks before, and he fought a zombie in Richie Santiago who just would not go away. So a lot of factors in there. So him fighting Cole Smith on that Vancouver card is going to be really interesting because Cole's...
Yeah, because I like Cole too. He's good.
That's a great fight.
Yeah, he's a funny dude.
Yeah, he is. And I love asking this question because we've had some great ideas. I usually host a post show after these events with different media members. And, I've talked to the likes of John Morgan, Aaron Bronstetter, Alexander K. Lee from MMA Fighting, Nolan King from MMA Junkie. And we always talk about, because as great as the Contender Series is, we always look at how to make things evolve and make things better. Because, I mean, the concept's already fantastic. But before I give you their takes and your responses to those, what do you think would be like a cool addition to the Contender Series concept to make it even better?
That's a good question. I haven't sat there and been like, I wish it was this. You know, in the building, so like the Ultimate Fighter gym the last 2 years, no air conditioning. It was gritty. It was hot. It was like the crowd was like right on top of them, even like, and the crowd's still right on top of them now. But I did like that feeling. And I think they did too, in terms of like, you haven't made it to the UFC yet. You have to earn your UFC shot. And now when they fight on TV, it looks different because it's like kind of stage lighting or whatever, because the Apex is brand new, state-of-the-art facility. So I don't know, but I don't know if there's a way in a brand new state-of-the-art facility to make it look gritty. You know what I mean? Right. To make it look like you have chain link fences on the walls like there was and stuff like that. It's not going to provide that look. So part of me just misses that element of it. But, and I think that the fighters kind of had to wrap their head around it too, because it's like an awkward room that's not that loud, yet it feels like a real show because it's lit that certain way and they have the walkouts and that sort of thing. So I think that's why in the first 2 weeks you saw 9 decisions, or what was it? It was we only had 4 fights the first week. We had 8 decisions in 9 fights the first 2 weeks.
Right.
So, but then I think people are getting it now, right? We're catching up to like, okay, yes, the show is back to being what it was. So I was nervous about that at the beginning of the season. Like, is this too stage lighty presentation, but we're not going to go all the way with it with walkout music and stuff? Like, are we trying to tiptoe on both sides of the fence and we're not going to be able to do it? And I think we've kind of transitioned to that. Like, the fighters get it and they understand it. So that was really my only thing early in the season. But I think that with the results, certainly after the break, after International Fight Week, we've seen, I'm just like, okay, I think it's good. I'm sure I'll have an idea like as I continue to do it, but I can't think of something that like right now I'm just like, I need to change about this.
Yeah,
it's too good. I'm interested to hear ideas.
All right, so John Morgan had a couple of suggestions. One was adding backup fighters would be one way to improve it in case.
Right.
It's only happened like once where a fight got scratched altogether, so at least you have somebody there, you know, in case of an injury or a bad weight cut. He also suggested, and this might be a little outside of the box, that guys on the UFC roster who have lost 2 or 3 in a row fight on the Contender Series to remain on the roster, which I think is interesting. Aaron said having events. Aaron said
I think that was like part of maybe what they thought the show might be. Not like necessarily that, but like I think there was talks about that, but ultimately they didn't want to make that this a show around that.
Yeah, that's just a lot of pressure on top of getting into a cage and fight. And then Aaron said to do weight class specific episodes to sort of narrow it down, as opposed to being like, all right, we know they need light heavyweights, so we know if this guy gets a knockout, he's probably going to get on. But just doing like cards based on specific weight classes, 5 strawweight fights or 5 light heavyweight fights. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't hate it. I don't know what the theory behind it is in terms of, because that obviously goes with like the Ultimate Fighter, and it's like we're looking for featherweights this season, or we're looking for lightweights, or whatever it is. So I don't totally hate that idea. I don't know. Maybe I'll bring that to the top and see what they said.
Alex, who's a big basketball guy, said Sean and this kind of refers to Ultimate Fighter too, Sean and Mick should draft their own rosters of fighters and have them compete against each other. Be like, all right, these are my guys against your guys or gals. And then Nolan sort of added his own caveat, because I actually like what Nolan says is we need to hear more from Sean and Mick during these episodes. Like, get their takes on how they rank the fighters. Like when Dana goes back and he's like making his decision, maybe have Sean and Mick on there and give their thoughts on the fights. Like, I think that'd be a cool thing, because we don't really get to hear from those guys very much, if at all, except for like the talking heads as they're walking down to the cage. What do you think about maybe adding a little bit more Mick and Sean to the mix?
I mean, I understand wanting the access, because we always want more access to whatever we're watching, whether it's cameras in the locker room in the NFL or mic'd up players, that sort of thing. So I understand it, and I don't, make a lot of these decisions, obviously, or any of them for that matter. But I just know that Mick and Sean are kind of off limits to the media. It's like they want to keep them kind of behind the curtain in terms of how they do their jobs and what they can say. So I don't think you'll see that. I mean, I like the concept, and I think it's an interesting concept. And of course, we want more. We want more information. Wouldn't you want to hear what Mick thinks about this guy that he put on the Contender Series, and then like got the finish or didn't get the finish, but man, like he's really good, Dana. He's you know, whatever. But that would create maybe some dissension in the back room. So I don't think you're gonna. I think you're gonna. Dana's the guy, and the other two are the mysterious guys who sit with him a lot. And they got phones. They got multiple phones. They got contacts everywhere. They got ears all over the world. But I don't think you'll hear much from them.
So here's what we've learned, ladies and gentlemen. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just keep things the way they are. I like that. It's so good. It's so good.
It's a great show. It's a great show that's perfectly built. I always say perfectly built for the attention span of America in this day and age. You know, it's like you don't have to watch a season of something. You tune in, you're going to get 5 fights, and in 2 hours or 2.5 hours, you're going to find out who's in the UFC. It's perfect.
Are you excited with what the Apex is going to produce? Because, you know, Dana had said the relaunch of UFC Fight Pass, we might have fights multiple times a week, maybe even every single day. You excited for where this can all go?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like, the building is huge, and what I tell people is, like, the building is amazing. It was an existing building. It wasn't like they built it like the headquarters. So there's still a lot that's not done in there. Like, it was office space for the previous company that they're going to tear out and put in more stuff for fighters. And, like, the TV studio that's going to go in there, it's not built yet, you know? So it's like the phase one was, like, get Contender Series able to be there. But, like, when the control rooms are in there, we're going to have more capabilities. When the TV studio goes in there next year, it's going to be awesome and going to provide a whole new look for pre- and post-fight shows and, like, you know, a bunch of other things that we can think of. You know what I mean? Like, we've been doing UFC On the Line, the gambling show on Fight Pass from, like, a mini studio or whatever. But when we can really blow out different productions, it's going to be awesome to have that in Vegas, state-of-the-art facility that's like able to handle a lot of live events, a lot of studio programming, a lot of good stuff. It's going to be great.
You've given me a lot of your time, and I appreciate it, but I have to ask this question because if I don't, I might be chastised for this because, you know, you went a little viral. A lot of people saw the Queen on the video poker thing that you posted on Twitter.
I know.
How do you see something like that and just be like, you know what? That kind of looks like me.
So this was like literally 2 days ago. My wife and I, we did a little staycation in Vegas, right? So we live like half hour west of the Strip, but her mother was in town to watch our son, and so we stayed a couple nights down on the Strip, and we were just goofing off, whatever. I had a couple of glasses of wine, and like we were playing crab. Usually we would play craps or poker or whatever, like table games. I'm not a slot guy at all. Neither is she. And I was just like, screw it. You know what? Let's just put like $5 in, play like 50-cent video poker. You know what I mean? Like, we're killing time. We're hanging out, like having a drink, whatever. And so we were playing. So I was like, a little buzzed. And I was just like, does that look like me? I was like, I feel like that looks like me. Like my face, you know what I mean? Because I know what people... I know, you know, after a while when people say, you look like so-and-so or you look like so-and-so or that kind of looks like you or whatever, you kind of get a gist of what people look for in terms of like when they say you look like something or someone. And so I was just like, I feel like that looks like me. Like the smile, like the Queen looks like she has a beard, first of all, because like the shadowing and like the bad drawing, whatever. So like it definitely looks like a man's face, and then like just the long hair. And in college, I had long hair. I had like, because I played club hockey, I had the hockey hair coming out of the back of the helmet. So it's like pictures of me where it's like I have a full head of brown hair. I was just like, I know people would say like the smile kind of looks like me because people are like, oh, you kind of look like so-and-so. So, yeah, I was just like, that kind of look like me. I was like, I'm going to tweet it. Screw it. Let's let the people decide. And enough agree. So I guess I look like the Queen on video poker now.
Well, there you go. We all have to strive for something in this life, right?
Exactly.
And you've done it. You've done it. Appreciate the time very much, man. Before we let you go, let the folks know where to find you on the web, social media, anything else you want to get off your chest. Give you the floor, man.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me, Mike. It was great talking to you, buddy.
Absolutely.
It's good to meet you. So at Brendan Fitz TV on Twitter and Instagram. And then, of course, my podcast is called Fitz and a Fighter. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere where you listen to podcasts, Google Podcasts. And I'm actually just starting my YouTube channel now because I'm just like figuring out this whole digital world of content and stuff. So I'm going to start posting all the episodes to YouTube, and I'm going to start clipping them off. You know how Joe Rogan's show has like 15-minute clips or like 10-minute clips or 5-minute clips, because you can't always listen to a 2-hour show or an hour show. So I'm just going to take the best of, and I'm going to start populating my YouTube channel with different clips of that. So literally that's what I was working on before I started talking to you. I was 2 minutes late to our interview, Mikey. So
it's all good.
So just, I love this sport so much. It's like totally hooked me in. And even when I'm like not doing UFC work, I want to keep doing more content and more work for it. So happy to keep getting stuff out as much as I can.
And you're just scratching the surface too, because I mean, how many episodes have you done of your show
10.
so far?
10? Yeah, 10.
And you had Jared Gordon on, and who was probably like
yeah.
Was he the interview that stuck out to you the most, you think?
I mean, like Jared Gordon, I sent him a note like after I started doing it, after I was like a few episodes in, because I knew his story is crazy, and I was just like, Jared, hey, if you're in Vegas, man, let me know. I'd love to get you on my new podcast, whatever. And so he reached out to me because he was going to be in a Contender Series with a guy that's at his camp, and I was like, yeah, I definitely have to do that one. So I knew his was going to be great. It was, man, like that guy's story is insane, and it's even crazier than I even knew. Like I didn't know about a lot of the stuff, or not a lot of the stuff, but I didn't know sexual assault victim when he was a kid, and his father's business burned down and killed 3 firemen on Father's Day of all days and stuff. Like his story is insane. So I recommend that episode for sure. Jessica Rose Clark was a really good one, popular one. Joe Benavidez, I didn't know he had was issues with drugs and alcohol to the point where he was sober by the time he was 21. Like wow. He was, as a teenager, drugs and alcohol, he tells that story. And so by the time he turned 21, he was already sober. He's been like 14 years sober at this point. So like Joe B's journey was crazy too. And he's obviously right up there, probably going to fight for the title next again. So he was the highest profile kind of fighter. And Forrest Griffin started the show. So, yeah, man, it's been good. And I keep trying to cross them off. I'm going to try to knock 1 or 2 out down in Uruguay when I'm there at the hotel. So we'll see who's coming down the pike.
There we go. We look forward to that. Thank you for doing this, Brendan. It was an honor. Yeah. Looking forward to the call in Uruguay.
Thanks for having me, Mike. All the best.